Good. All right, we are now officially time to get this party started. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Christine Perez. I am the AFP Miami President and Education Co-Chair. We're so glad that you're here joining us today, whether you're in Miami, South Florida, Wisconsin, New York. We're just glad that you're here to access some great quality education. Now, I'm going to just share a little bit of information that we have upcoming in our own chapter, and then I'll turn it over to Allison to present on this incredible topic. So, we at AFP Miami strongly value providing quality education, and you'll see that in a minute. And our next educational session coming up is actually October 21st from 12 to 1. We'll be doing a session on ethics in fundraising, building integrity and trust in nonprofit organizations. And this is provided in partnership with 4 other local chapters, and it's from 12 to 1. And it's completely free, so please feel free to join us if you're available. Then we just announced that we have our Joyce Gallia Scholarship is open. And this is a scholarship opportunity for Miami members who have less than 10 years of fundraising experience and have never been to AFP Icon. So strongly recommend, if you haven't been and you meet those criteria, to apply. Then right around the corner is this little thing called National Philanthropy Day on November 7th from 11 to 2 p.m. at Jungle Island. It's an opportunity for us to celebrate and honor philanthropy in our community. If you haven't purchased tickets, we would love for you to join us. And again, I'll drop all this information in the chat. And then finally, we have an upcoming member mixer. This is intel because it hasn't gone out yet, but December 18th, we are doing an event for members and non-members alike to come and connect. December 18th at PM, so stay tuned for more. And then finally, we've got to dig into some education. So a huge thank you to Allison for presenting today. In fact, Allison Martinez Finstad, NPA and CFRE. She is going to be presenting Board Development, the Foundation of Nonprofit Success. Now, Allison brings more than 25 years of nonprofit experience, having played key fundraising roles in both local and international organizations. Allison holds a master's in public administration, a certificate in marketing from Simon School of Business, a bachelor's in anthropology from the University of Rochester, and is a certified fundraising executive. She has served as a board member for the Association of Fundraising Professionals, Genesee Valley Chapter, and the Margaret Home. And currently, she provides board leadership to the Salvation Army of Greater Rochester. She lives in Penfield, New York, with her husband and 2 kids. And without further ado, I turn it over to Allison.
Well, thank you, Christine, for your warm welcome. And it's a pleasure to be with the Miami chapter of AFP, as well as some friends from New York and Wisconsin and perhaps some other states. Today, we will talk about board development and why a healthy board is so important, perhaps the most important factor to the health of your organization. This applies to organizations of any size. I know we have a variety of different types of organizations with us today, different sizes, and so I hope everybody finds this useful. So we'll begin with what I like to call the house analogy, which explains the different levels of the organizational house and their relationship to one another. Then we'll dive into the board life cycle, and you can assess what stage of the board life cycle that your organization is at currently. And we'll discuss lastly how to create the masterpiece board for your organization. You may find that board chairs and executive directors are the ones who can actually affect this the most. And so feel free to forward this recording to them since it is being recorded if you think that they would find this useful. So the house analogy, I often suggest that my clients imagine their organization is a house. The foundation of the house, the concrete slab that everything rests on, is your board of directors. even if the organization has a compelling mission, a great staff, great programming, and even a couple million extra dollars in the bank, if the foundation of that house is not properly maintained, eventually the house can crumble. So having a strong foundation means that the organization has a clear idea of what their ideal board will look like, that the right board members with the right skill sets are in the right seats, that they are expanding the organization's network, that 100% of them are leading with a meaningful personal gift, and that they are wonderful ambassadors for your organization. There also ought to be a steady pipeline of new board members entering the organization. Practices put in place like annual retreats and self-assessments. Board development is potentially the highest leverage move an organization can make toward its sustainability. And the truth is, most organizations don't pay enough attention to this. So that's why we're going to talk about it today. Then looking at this house, the first floor of your house is the strategic plan. And if we think about our own homes, the first floor is very busy. We've got the front door, the living room, the kitchen. It's where most of the action takes place. And similarly, a strategic plan should be very action oriented, very actionable, visited frequently. It's something that should not sit on a shelf, but should potentially be reviewed at every board meeting. It determines how scarce resources like time and money ought to be allocated. And it allows, and maybe most importantly, it allows the organization to say no to things that could lead to mission creep. And as having the strategic plan in place is an indispensable part of the organization's infrastructure. And then the top floor is the fund development plan. This shows how you will raise the money you need to carry out the day-to-day operations of the organization, as well as the strategic plan. It should also include any kind of marketing or communication initiatives that you're going to do. And let me tell you, every organization wants to start at the top floor, the fund development, and work their way down. Because you need money like yesterday to keep the lights on, pay the staff, do all the things. But here's the thing, if you do it that way, where we're trying to raise the money first and worry about the other stuff later, you're going to be stuck on a hamster wheel, chasing down dollars for operations, starting each new fiscal year over at zero. And the thing is, trying to raise money for operations like the salaries, like keeping the lights on, like buying maybe a new boiler, although I guess that's capital, those items are not necessarily compelling to major donors. Major donors are looking for an organization that attracts community leaders, that has a visionary plan to transform the community in alignment with their own values, and that has a plan to get there. They are excited to make a transformational gift, but the board of directors needs to be shored up and the strategic plan in place to be able to activate those transformational gifts. So we don't want to start at the top and work our way down. We want to shore up the board, make sure we've got a strategic plan, and then that leads to an upward spiral of fundraising momentum. So for today's purposes, we're going to focus on the foundation of the organizational house, the board of directors. So I'd like to introduce you to what I call the board lifecycle. This is something that I created after doing a lot of research on boards, working with many different boards, being on boards, listening to other experts in board development. And it's what I created is a big ugly thing. It's this big gigantic spreadsheet, and we can forward you the PDF after this if you'd like, but I didn't want to share my screen because it's just too many words. But I'm going to break it down for you here with the slides. So the healthy boards go through at least 2 stages and possibly 3. When a board is not tended to and cultivated like a garden, it can become stagnant, which is stage 4, but we don't actually want to get there. So let's start with stage 1. I call that the founding or working board. I wonder if any of you could be in this boat right now. Stage 1 is when a board is fairly new, and even an organization that's been around for a few years can be in stage 1, but if you stay there too long, it's not great. There's no like official rule of thumb that I've heard of, but I would say more than 5 years in stage one, and the organization is holding itself back. So here are some characteristics that mark stage one, the founding working board. Number one, the board is probably composed of people selected by the leader. When the executive director started the organization, they had to put together a board. And so they may have grabbed their family, their friends, their neighbor, their cousin, their whoever was available at that time. And it's fairly homogenous in nature. Not a bad thing to start, but it's not going to get you to the next level. Second, some boards are characterized as leading boards, and some boards are characterized as following boards. A leading board means that the board tends to lead the executive director and the rest of the organization, and sometimes they struggle to properly delegate responsibility. And a following board tends to delegate most of the decisions to an entrepreneurial executive director who takes responsibility for the growth of the organization. And then the board tends to wait for direction from the executive director about what to do. So you might say, well, which one is better? Should you be a leading board or should you be a following board? And at the first stage, what's best is actually a balance between the two. That would be ideal. Board meetings in stage one tend to be informal, casual presentations, kind of checking in, generally encouraging the staff leader. They're not using something like Robert's Rules of Order yet. Typically, there's no board committees quite yet, and the board often does the work of the staff to keep things going. The transition to hiring staff at this stage can be very challenging because the board feels a strong sense of ownership over the operations of the organization. But some of the initial staff members may actually be hires from the board. And the personality of the board, and this may be the best part about stage one, is the personality of the board tends to be very gung-ho, on fire for the mission, with a strong sense of organizational ownership because they helped birth this organization. So I wonder if any of you are thinking, yes, that is where we are right now. Or like, I remember the days when we were there. There's no shame in being there. You just don't want to be there forever. Now, the transition from stage one to stage two is pretty challenging. It can be pretty fraught. It can take a couple years. And I'm going to talk about the transition in a minute. But first, I wanted to tell you about what stage two looks like. So stage two is the governing managing board. And if an organization goes to stage two, they've come a long way. An organization can actually stay in stage two indefinitely. It's a healthy place to be. There's no harm in it. Or they could move on to stage three, and we'll talk about the difference in just a moment. So characteristics of a board in stage two would be that there's been an intentional effort to bring in new board members with diverse attributes, diverse skill sets. So the board is larger and better equipped to grow the organization. The executive director is investing time in getting to know these board members personally because they may no longer be part of the executive director's network. They're coming from other board referrals. The executive director is now managing a more complex organization and has probably hired staff. The executive director and the board are performing self-evaluations of themselves about annually. There should be role descriptions for each board position. So president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, at large, each one should have a written role description. There's increased board responsibility for the health of the organization, which should result in more board participation in fundraising. Meetings are better organized. They're probably using Robert's rules. Committees have started to form. Typically, it's finance, development, and nominating or governing committees that form first. And if you're in a position where you're like, we need to start forming committees, but we don't really know which ones to form, I recently wrote an article about that on the Benezet Advisors blog. It should be the most recent one, and you could look at the article. It might help you sort that out. Also, the board chair and executive director need to work closely together, and their good relationship is absolutely essential for the organization to thrive. If they're not getting along, that's a red flag at this stage. The board is no longer micromanaging the staff. The staff is accepting that the board is ultimately responsible for the organization, that they're accountable to the board, and the board is no longer on the front lines of putting out the fires. That is more of a staff job, but they are thinking strategically and focusing on building capacity. So, like I said earlier, stage two is a perfectly healthy for a good place to be. And as long as the board is properly cultivated, it doesn't necessarily need to grow to stage three. And the reason So going back a little bit here, the reason that the transition from stage one, the founding board, to this stage, the governing managing board, is so fraught is because there is this real paradigm shift that needs to take place in the minds of the founding board and the founding executive director who birthed the organization. They need to step back, ask if they are still indeed the right people to lead the organization. Are they the right people for the roles they're in? And they may need to hand some control of the organization over to new staff members. And that transition is a very hard thing to do. So if you've ever been in the transition from stage one to stage two, here are some markers of that transition. You may have found that some founding board members decide to rotate off, creating opportunities for new members to join. That's good. You may have noticed that now there's less homogeneity among the board, more diversity in opinions, which is good, but tensions can sometimes arise. You may find that the executive director is becoming overwhelmed with the increasing complexity of the organization. You may have noticed that there's a need to start systematizing the work, creating replicable processes that can happen again at different times or at different locations. And truly, the board's responsibility increases because it's taking ownership of the financial health of the organization. So that transition from stage one to stage two can take a couple years. Okay, so we've talked about stage two, and now we're going to move on to stage three, the institutional fundraising board. Now, this stage may apply to some of you on this call, particularly if you are from higher ed or a United Way. I saw some of those types of organizations on the attendee list. Not every organization makes it to stage three. That's okay. Stage three are the boards that are considered more prestigious in nature. It might be universities, hospitals, large museums, and so forth. So some characteristics of boards in stage three would be that they tend to have well-known people serving on the board who can open doors to significant funders locally and nationally. The board accepts that accepts that fundraising is its primary responsibility and focuses on making introductions to people with influence and affluence. Board members may have specific goals that they are accountable for. The work takes place primarily in committees between the board meetings. We are no longer having long meandering meetings full of just report after report. Like we come back, make it quick and then do the work in the committees. And the executive director is probably now a CEO who manages a large staff in a complex organization with a laser focus on strategic direction. So this transition from stage two, the governing managing board, to stage three, the institutional fundraising board, is a lot easier than the first transition because it does not require this complete reorientation of how the board thinks about the organization. So there's a few things. If you're in a situation where you're like, yeah, we might transition from stage two to stage three, there's a few things that you can do to prepare. It's good to consider developing formal board nominating and onboarding processes. You can find those if you just type it into AI, but if you want help, I can help you with that. You might want to consider whether you have an advisory committee that brings new leaders to the table in an influential non-voting function. Advisory committees are awesome for a lot of reasons. It's a place that if you have really great board members who their term is up, and you are going to follow their term limits, because that's a good and healthy thing to do, they have a place that they can go for a year or two and stay involved before they maybe rejoin the board. If that's their intent, they can join the advisory board. If you have like a local or national or international celebrity who you'd like to have affiliated with your organization, but they don't really want to join the board, you could have them be on the advisory board. It's a much lower commitment. If there are clients that your organization serves that may not be prepared for one reason or another to join the governing board, they can have a voice on the advisory board. It's a really cool way to extend the reach of your organization in a non-voting capacity. So anyway, talking more about the transition from stage two to stage three, you want to reduce your board's role in operations. That's for staff. You want to increase the board's role in setting policy and make sure that there are succession plans put. There's got to be succession plans in place for leadership. Okay, so stage two is good. Stage three is good. Stage four is not. And that's the stagnant board. Um, I get a lot of calls from organizations that are like, there's something wrong with our board. We can't really quite put our finger on it, but we just know that it's not healthy. It's not what it used to be. Can you help us? And more often than not, they just have a stagnant board that hasn't been well tended. And so some characteristics of a stagnant board. You've got veteran board members who've been on it for years. They're no longer enthusiastic about the cause, but for whatever reason, they don't want to rotate off, and so they're on the board. There might be a lack of needed skill sets or professional or personal attributes. The board members don't give as generously as they used to. Maybe they're not introducing the organization to their network anymore because they've already introduced it to their whole network and their network is not growing. Board members who are no longer on board with the mission, vision, values of the organization shouldn't be on the board anymore. And that can happen. Organizations change, people change. Sometimes there's just no longer the synergy that there used to be. When term limits are ignored, this happens all the time. It leads to burnout. It's really good to honor term limits. If there are ineffective nominating and onboarding processes, so maybe the wrong people get invited onto the board, or maybe a great person is invited onto the board, but didn't have a good onboarding process, and they just kind of get thrown into the mix and spend their entire first term just trying to figure out what's actually happening. That doesn't help. And then there could be a whole slew of other issues that are specific to various nonprofits that might indicate that the board is stagnant. So if you do believe that your board might be in this position, don't ignore it and assume it will go away, because it typically only gets worse. The key is to have a board chair and executive director who understand the importance of board development, are willing to invest some resources and time into it, and to take a hard look at the board's composition, the effectiveness of meetings, the culture present on the board, whether the right practices are in place, and then to engage a board development process to bring it all to light, bring it all to fruition, get the right people in the right seats. So speaking of bringing in the right people, now we get to the fun stuff, which is creating your masterpiece board. So once you have figured out where your board is in the board life cycle, you can then determine where it needs to go next as we talk about how to create your masterpiece board. So it is a critically important step in board development to identify what the ideal board looks like so you know what direction to go in. It's like when you get in your car for a road trip, you probably don't just get in and drive aimlessly, right? Looking for like nice views or good restaurants along the way. You probably know where you are going, and you've already GPSed out your trajectory, and you know how you're going to get there. And similarly with creating your masterpiece board, you want to figure out where you're going so that you know how to get there. So we're going to like sort of paint the picture of a beautiful board together. And you're going to have to think about it though, for your board. What's the best thing for your board to do? And it's also, think about it as like creating a filter. We're going to create this filter together, and then all the new board members must pass through this filter. So it's really, you got to get really clear on what you want your filter to look like. And so I'm literally going to walk you through how I work with my clients at board retreats in composing their masterpiece board. First, KIAA. I don't know if you've heard of this industry term. It means knowledge, influence, affluence, and affection. And I bring it up with you because as you bring on new board members, they all need to have the last attribute, which is affection for the cause. They have to love the cause or they shouldn't be on the board. But if that's the only attribute they have, that's not enough for board membership. And a board of people who only have affection for the cause is not going to be a very effective board. You can have affection for the cause and just be like a regular volunteer. So board members need to have affection for the cause and then one additional attribute. And it can be either a specific type of knowledge that would benefit the organization, influence in the community, and willingness to introduce your organization to their valuable connections, or affluence and a willingness to give from their abundance. So KIAA, knowledge, influence, affluence, affection, it's really important to keep in mind, and it's how you start creating this filter of that you want your new board members to have to pass through. So once you understand the KIAA, we can start talking about other important personal attributes. So I ask boards to list for me what types of personal attributes they would like their board members specifically to have. And we come up with all sorts of things. So some examples include everyone on the board must have a passion for the organization's mission, vision, and values. That's probably important to most boards. Maybe they all have to agree to adhere to the board's term limits and bylaws. It's pretty standard. The board member must agree to use the skill set or attribute for which he or she was recruited. And that's just a suggestion that I put out there because of a situation that happened where there was, for one of my clients, they recruited a gentleman who had skills in finance, but they didn't mention to him in that cultivation process that that's why they were asking him to join the board, because of his finance skills. So when he was on the board, he just really wanted to like work with the people the organization served. And that's a very kind-hearted thing, but they needed him to help with finances. And so there was this disconnect between what they were asking him to do and what he thought he was there for. And you know how they say clear is kind? It's kind to be upfront in that prospective board member cultivation process to say, hey, we heard that you are extraordinary in human resources or marketing or whatever it may be, grant writing, buildings and grounds. And that's a skill set that we're hoping that you'll share with us so that they're aware that that's why they're being recruited. So something to keep in mind. Other personal attributes, maybe it's reliability, credibility, humility, integrity, anything that's particularly important to your organization. Do you want them to have the ability to work as a team, to communicate clearly? Some organizations that have been through certain things will say communication first and foremost. They have to be able to say when something is wrong and not keep it to themselves or whatever is most important to your organization. We just want to list it. Do they need to pass a background check of some sort? Do they need some kind of documentation? Any of that is important to list here in the personal attributes. So these criteria obviously vary from organization to organization. So just important to give some thought as to what your organization needs and then hold to those standards. Then we talk about demographics. For instance, gender. On your board, is it important for both male and female to be represented? I would assume so. Would you want, for instance, no more than like 20% of, or no less than 20% of either gender? Like, what if it was all male, all female? Does it matter to you? How do you want the gender makeup on your board to look? Race. Would you want your board to be proportionally reflective of the community's racial makeup? Maybe the client's racial makeup of those that you serve? How would racial diversity best be expressed on your board? It's good to be specific about what you're looking for. Age, should each generation be represented by like at least one person? How would age diversity be best expressed on your board? Do you need some folks from the older population, the younger population? Just be clear on what you're looking for there. Religion, does each board member need to adhere to a certain faith, or are you open to anything and everyone? Location, are you open to remote board members for certain roles? That can really expand your network wonderfully if people can just attend your board meetings remotely. So that's the demographics piece. So we had personal attributes, we get into demographics, and then we start talking about skill sets. And this is kind of really the meat of the board. We look through a list of essential and desired skill sets. Oh, I forgot one thing. I'm sorry about that. Before we get into skill sets, giving. We get into annual giving. What I find is that some boards don't have everybody on their board giving. They may be giving their time, their talent, but they're not giving their treasure. And really 100% of board members ought to be making an actual monetary gift. So sometimes people will say, well, this person, they did some consulting for us or they did this service, and that's wonderful. But there are some grant proposals that will ask if 100% of your board is giving, and you should be able to say yes, even if they're giving a small amount. So having expectations as far as board giving is important. The two options I typically suggest that organizations set forth include either each board member is asked to give a certain amount per year, or the organization is within each board member's top 3 philanthropic priorities. So it's up to the board member how much he or she wants to give, but it just has to be among their top philanthropic priorities. I prefer this option because it gives maximum flexibility to people who may bring important attributes and skill sets to the table, but may not be super wealthy. So now that we've covered the personal attributes, the demographics, and giving, we can get into the meat by identifying skill sets. So I have a list of common skill sets for board members. And the first thing we do is talk about whether each skill set is essential for someone on the board to have, desired but non-essential, already covered by a staff person, fulfilled by a non-board volunteer, or non-essential. That's important to do because we don't want to be recruiting board members for skill sets that are not actually needed at this point. So we look through the list of all the essential and desired board skill sets and determine which current board member has this skill set, when is that person's term up, and who else do we know that could fulfill that skill set once the term ends? And I will ask people in the room to pull out their phones and look through their LinkedIn list, their Christmas card list, their neighborhood directory, whatever their network is, to find people as we brainstorm together names who could fill the pipeline for each essential or desired skill set. Then we look at whether each of the people that we're brainstorming fulfill the other criteria. Do they have affection for the cause? Do they bring either knowledge, influence, or affluence? Do they meet all the personal attributes? And do they fit somewhere within those demographics? We make sure that they can pass through the filter. And then lastly, we determine who among the people that we've listed should be cultivated to join the board, and who should be the cultivator, and what the ideal time frame should be. You don't want to have all your board members joining at one time because then they're all going to exit at one time. So we try and stagger it. I like to joke that we don't propose on the first date, right? So don't call your neighbor and say, hey, Bob, I hear you're a pretty good accountant and I'm on this board and do you want to join us? Like, that board membership is so much more important than just getting a living, breathing human being in the boardroom. You want to make sure that the position is a good fit for both the nonprofit and the board member, that the board member is going to add to and increase the healthy culture of the board. And much like we development professionals cultivate major donors, we want to cultivate prospective board members, making sure we understand their values and desires to before they join the board, and not just extracting from them their wallet, their knowledge, their resources. Like, it has to be, mutually fulfilling. So by the time we leave the retreat, we have a very actionable plan for bringing new people onto the board and a clear sense of how that will happen. And you can probably do this on your own. I'm here if you need help, but I'm telling you everything that I do. It's also wise to have a process for the ongoing nomination of new board members. And so say you know somebody who would make a great board member. How does that process work? Do you just invite them to a board meeting to sit in? Like, probably not. There should be a process for who you introduce them to. Do they take a tour of your facility? Do you take them to lunch? So on and so forth. So have your ongoing nomination as a plan. Make sure you've got board member role descriptions, a board orientation checklist, annual evaluations for the board members and the chief executive, a plan for annual board retreats. Those things will help the board to be healthy. That concludes the part about board development. And I can take any questions later if I've missed anything. But I would like to just touch upon briefly the other two floors of the house: strategic planning and fund development planning. So remember, the house strategic planning is your first floor, your very action-oriented floor. To get into the weeds a little bit here, the strategic plan clarifies an organization's mission, vision, and values. It establishes the top 3 to 5 strategic goals that will truly bring the organization to the next level. And it lays out all the necessary actionable objectives to meet those goals, including a champion, a due date, a budgeted amount allocated to the goal, and so on. So for some of our clients, we do a deeper dive and and we actually figure out what are the challenging future scenarios that the organization may encounter, that they may not want to think about, but we go through some of those scenarios because it's important to think about them. And sometimes we create a strategy screen or a set of criteria that your organization will use to choose to figure out whether a future strategy is consistent with its identity. And it puts the organization in a position to do its own strategic plan in the future. Donors want to see that an organization has a clear and exciting vision for the future. We say small donations, try that again. Small donations follow small visions, and big donations follow big visions. So laying the big vision out in the strategic plan is important. And lastly, fund development planning. So that's the top of the house. Now here, I'm going to be speaking more to those of you with the smaller organizations, because the bigger ones have probably figured this out pretty well. Small organizations, make sure that you're diversifying your income sources. You want a mix of major giving, mid-level giving, annual campaigns, maybe tuition, maybe membership fees, grants, events, planned giving, and so on. Consider new sources of income or innovative sources like earned income and social enterprise. And take a look at the return on investment or the cost per dollar raised of each source. What you'll find is that major giving and capital campaigns have the best ROI, that acquisition mailings and large events tend to have the worst ROI, and everything else kind of falls somewhere in between. It's good to have a calendar that lists all your development initiatives throughout the year and try and straight line that budget as much as possible so that there's consistent monthly income, because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket where if say you're God forbid your gala is in December and you're getting 90% of your income in December, that is cause for many migraines. You don't want to rely on one grant, one year-end campaign, and add in that calendar that you're trying to, where you're plugging everything in to get even cash flow. Also add all of your marketing and communications initiatives to it so that your teams are all on the same page. So carry out all these things and you'll be well on your way to financial sustainability. So there you have it, board development, strategic planning, and fund development planning, the 3 layers to a financially sustainable organization. Getting this house in order will work wonders for many organizations. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
All right. For those of us on the call, if you would like to simply unmute yourself and ask a question, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi,
All right.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I was wondering what your thoughts are on utilizing some of the tips in recruiting new board members and applying them to current board members just for review and looking for opportunities for improvement there.
I think that's a great question. The only obstacle I would see is that if they were recruited under a different set of criteria than where you want to go, it can be a little tricky. But if your organization is at a crossroads and you're thinking, we really need to change the way we've been operating, I think that you could roll out new expectations gently, maybe with some discussion, and say, this is where we would like to head as a board. I mean, this would be primarily led by the board chair, right, or the executive committee. And we're wondering how the board feels about this, and is this agreeable to you? And perhaps you say we are going to implement these new standards in a year or something, and that they have the opportunity to what do you call it when you decide to just leave? They can stay on if they want, or they can vote themselves out, whatever that term is. If they feel like no longer their values and their goals align with the organization's. I don't know what your particular organization is going through, and you're welcome to share more if you like. It's up to you. But it seems like that's kind of a sensitive thing, and so it may just need to be done with sensitivity and care and tact, and it might take a little time.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
And then Allison, we have a question from Doug in the chat. And his question is, are there any rules of thumb on optimal board size relative to the size of the organization?
That is a great question. And because I get it more than probably any other question, I actually wrote a little article on it. And it's on my blog. And it's like, what size should my board be? I think it's what it's called. But here's basically what I say in it. I wouldn't say that there's a rule of thumb necessarily. And I will admit to being biased toward larger boards. So I'll start by saying that larger boards mean that you have more skill sets, more networks, more potential to raise money, more voices, more many things. Oh, thanks, Christine, for grabbing that. And that since most boards just need a quorum and they don't need consensus, there's not a whole lot of drawbacks to having larger boards. Now, you don't want it to get so large that it becomes siloed and cliquey and there's different people trying to take the organization in different ways. That would be very unhealthy. But generally speaking, a larger board is not a bad thing. I think some people fear it. Maybe they fear like a lack of, like the executive director or board chair may feel like they have a lack of control. But if you're very selective about who you have joining your board and you're clear on what the ideal board looks like, a large board is helpful. So by large board, let's see, I'm working with an organization now that has like a $500,000 budget. It's not huge. And they have a board of like probably getting close to 20 people. And that has worked out very well for them. I guess the advantage to smaller boards would be that they can be pretty nimble, pretty quick. They tend to have more homogenous thoughts, but that is also not necessarily a good thing when everybody's homogenous. Getting that diversity of opinion is really important. So you can do whichever way you want. I just like to see boards be a little bit larger. And if you want to share information on your organization's budget size, whether if your budget's $200,000 versus 20 million, that certainly changes the conversation.
Great. Do we have any other questions for Allison? You can take yourself off of mute and just ask away. So, oh, go ahead.
We're definitely a stage one moving to stage two. And it's taken a lot of my energy to get them to even start to move to stage two.
Mm-hmm.
And they're definitely a following board.
Mm-hmm.
But in the last 6 months, because I told them I wanted to retire, that has sparked them into action. But we really need to build a board. And I hear you saying, have everybody take out their phone. But in the field that I'm in, people don't make money. Like it's, like I can't tell you how hard we have been looking to find new board members. Is like you don't have the magic pill.
Are you willing to share what field you're in?
Spiritual care.
Okay. Can you be any more detailed about that? Like what city are you in?
We're in Rochester, New York.
Oh, that's where I am.
Oh, nice.
What's
And
your organization called?
Crossroads of Caring.
Oh, Marianne, we just were texting the other day. Yes. I'm so sorry.
And so we provide education for spiritual care, and we're accredited by ACPE, but we're a freestanding program. And a lot of our programs are in hospitals, nursing homes, hospices. So other programs are affiliated with large organizations, but we're very small. We have a budget less than 100,000, and pretty much there's me, and then there's a quarter-time admin.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm doing the fundraising, I'm writing the grants, I'm also running the program. I'm trying to watch the budget, and I have a 5-member board. And now they're all contributing their skills, which I feel like is a real win. But we need more. Like we have more that we could do because people are coming to us, but I just can't do anymore.
Yeah, and that's a recipe for burnout for
Yeah,
anyone
so
here. Yeah. Yeah. Oh no, I feel it. Like I understand that. It's a tough spot. How long have you been in, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds here. We may just need to talk, but how long have you been in
we're in our
operation?
fifth year.
Fifth year. Okay. Yes. So I would probably start with being very clear on what is your competitive advantage. What does Crossroads of Caring do better or differently than any other organization? Because that is going to be key to your fundraising, is being very clear on your competitive advantage. And then once you have clarity around that, it is a matter of accessing Rochester's networks, um, to figure out who might have an interest in this, who cares about the outcomes of this, but who may have connections. And that's something where you have to leverage your current connections. And I can, because we're in the same community, I have some ideas, but you would want to leverage current connections to ask about. Once, think about, the Kevin Bacon networking game. Who do they know? Who knows who? Who knows who? And start bringing other people into your organization and getting them interested. It's hard work. It's hard work, but at this point, it's a matter of making sure that you find the right people to get around the table.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can talk. We can talk more about the details of what you're going through if you'd like to.
Okay. Thanks.
This is Cinda. I have a question. Also being relatively close to the Rochester area, it's a difficult question for me to ask because I think we're very good at a lot of the skill sets, but we don't. We are a community health center, so we have guidelines and specifics on how we arrive at the demographics of our board. And what has become more of a problem is that we're not that good at representing the racial demographic that we should, the ethnic demographic that we should. And how does one work with a community that's unfamiliar?
Yeah, you may be in a tough spot regionally for that particular demographic. Tell me again who is requiring the particular.
We are community health centers, so our requirements are from HRSA.
Okay,
and
gotcha.
It's supposed to, and our board is on some level supposed to look like the patients that we serve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and we do have patients that are in the farm worker community, and right now that's a little difficult.
Yeah.
And we have patients who are not affluent, and sometimes that's difficult. And we have patients who are not white, and sometimes that can be difficult. And there should be a culturally sensitive way to look for board members who don't look like us. So that's kind of the advice that I was wanting. I don't know if I'm making myself clear enough.
I think so. It can be hard when you have a bevy of regulations for how your board should look, when you need your board to do an act or give a certain way. And so that's where I wonder if they would be willing to accept an advisory board. So for instance, if your board needs to be made up primarily of people who maybe live in a very low income area or don't have that much of an education, there's nothing wrong with them giving voice to the organization. But the fact is, the organization needs a good amount of its board to be like wealthy donors. I mean, not everybody has to be, but you want at least a few people to be. And so it can be helpful if your regulating agency would accept it, having an advisory board where their voices are heard and sought after and listened to and taken very seriously, but they are not the ones that you are asking to write the big checks, because that is not a fair position to put them in. And then leaving your governing board as having the criteria that your organization needs to be able to operate effectively. So is that something that they would accept?
Not exactly, but we have been talking about the idea of having an advisory board just because we know that there are a number of opportunities that we're not exploring, particularly in the Rochester area. And our health centers go all the way down to Hornell.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's a vast area. But I was thinking of what you just said about advisory boards and wondering if that then becomes the source of people who have ideas of people that we can recruit for the actual board that we're required to have. Does that make sense?
Cinda, totally. In fact, you're making me realize I forgot to mention something. That advisory board is a great pipeline to governing board. So that's one of the many good reasons to have one, is that the people who are on the advisory board, if they are younger, less experienced, they can get some time being on like a board adjacent type group, and then they become board members later. So that would work out really well.
That sounds really great. Thank you.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
What I can send to you, I wrote a white paper on why advisory boards are helpful, and I can send that to you, Cinda, if you want to reach out and send me your email.
That would be super. I would appreciate that very much.
You are welcome.
All right, we have time for one more question. Do we have any other questions for our speaker, Allison, today? Checking to see if anyone's going off of mute. Well, I think with that, I do want to just say thank you so much to everyone who has joined us today. A huge round of applause. And thank you to Allison for sharing her wealth of information. I know many of us would love for you to come and present at our boards as we speak, just because I think it's just so important. And I loved the analogy of the house and the foundation of the house, really was wonderful. So everyone on this call, and those of you that weren't able to join us today, we will be emailing this recording, the PowerPoint slides from today's session, but also if you'd like to get in contact with Allison after the session, I don't know if Allison, if you want to pull up your slide or one last time. So if you want to get in contact with Allison, she's here to answer any of your questions and be a resource for you. And just thank you so much. A lot of gratitude for you in the chat, Allison.
Thank you guys. It's so nice.
No, it's so true. But again, Allison is here, a wonderful professional in the fundraising space, and we appreciate you all. And we're giving you 3 minutes back to your day, which I know in the nonprofit sector is hours. But thank you again, Allison. Thank you for all of you for joining us, and we look forward to connecting in the future. Bye. Thank you.